Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. At the end of last year, one of my trade recommendations was 30-year maturity African Eurobond paper. I was saying double-digit dollar yields will be difficult to resist. And I said you might consider putting together a portfolio and leveraging it 50%. We've had tremendous profits in that trade. This is a time to take it off the table. A sub-Saharan African seduction. Africa is attracting ever more interest from powers elsewhere, says The Economist. Very big article, really interesting. Graham Greene, who's a great writer, chronicler of hazy entrepots, would have loved Djibouti. A third of global shipping streams by this little bit of Northeast Africa. All the world, it seems, is crammed together in its capital. French, Italian, Japanese military bases, Camp Lemonnier, America's only permanent military base in Africa. China's first such base is a little to the northwest of it. Indian and British embassies will soon open. Within weeks, the Turkiye Diyanet Foundation will open the largest mosque in East Africa in the city. The muezzin will struggle to be heard amid the roar of fighter jets overhead, writes The Economist. Djibouti is small, but it boasts a multi-purpose port, a railway to Ethiopia, and the beginnings of a free trade zone, which once finished will be the largest in Africa. They were all built by Chinese state-owned firms and are at least partly run by them. According to McKinsey, a management consultancy, there are now 10,000 Chinese businesses on the African continent. Alex Vines of Chatham House, a think tank in London, talks of a new scramble for Africa. According to the Diplometrics project at the University of Denver, more than 320 embassies or consulates were opened in Africa between 2010 and 2016. Turkey alone opened 26. The boom continues. Last year, India announced it would open 18 more. This year, Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, is set to host the first Russia-Africa summit, a tribute act to the Triennial Forum on Africa-China cooperation. Chinese top officials made 79 visits to Africa in the decade up to 2018. Since 2008, Turkey's leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan has paid more than 30 visits to African countries, most of them sub-Saharan. Macron has visited the continent 9 times since becoming president in 2017. Modi has visited 8 African countries during his 5 years in power in India, but not all are so keen. Kanye West and Kim Kardashian have visited more African leaders than has Mr. Trump, who has yet to set foot on the continent. Such visits and summits are in part efforts to make use of Africa's diplomatic clout. This is important. Its 54 nations make up more than a quarter of the UN General Assembly. The Horn of Africa has become part of the broader competition between Saudi Arabia, the UAE on one side, and Iran, Qatar, and Turkey on the other. China's military influence stretches well beyond the base in Djibouti. Last year, the People's Liberation Army conducted exercises in Cameroon, Gabon, Ghana, and Nigeria. China sells more weapons in sub-Saharan Africa than any other nation. It has accounted for 27% of the region's arms imports in 2013 to 2017. It wants to protect trade. In Beijing, East Africa is counted as part of the Maritime Silk Road. There are more than 1 million Chinese living in Africa who may need protection too. During the Libyan Revolution of 2011, a Chinese naval vessel helped in the evacuation of thousands of Chinese contractors from the country. Russia's moves are more muscular, more mercenary. Often the key figures are cronies of Mr. Putin, like Yevgeny Prigozhin, a former chef, rather than official state employees. Mr. Vines likens them to Cecil Rhodes and other 19th century imperialists who would lead private invasions with the implicit protection of the government back home. Though its role in the CAR is the most high profile, Russia has been intensifying its links across Africa. At least 250,000 Africans were trained in or by the Soviet Union before its demise in 1991. America's relative economic importance is waning. In 2006, America, China, and France were the 3 countries doing the most trade with sub-Saharan Africa, defined as the sum of imports and exports. From 2006 to 2018, Chinese trade increased by 226% and India's by 292%. Turkey, 216%, Russia, 335%, Indonesia, 224%. The EU, still all told the region's largest trading partner, managed only a modest 41%. American trade with sub-Saharan Africa shrank. Other countries see Africa as a customer for excess capacity. China, which has run up huge stockpiles, sold more than 781,000 tons of rice to African countries in 2017, more than 10 times the amount in 2016, with Ivory Coast overtaking South Korea as the biggest importer. Turkish Airlines, which is 49% state-owned, flies to more than 50 African cities. Others are thus positioned to take up some slack as China recalibrates its approach to the continent to make it less expensive. They're to write off $1 billion in losses on the railway from Djibouti to Ethiopia after fewer passengers turned up than expected. Xi, of course, warned against state-backed investments which amount to vanity projects. On average, 32% of African external public debt is owed to private lenders, 35% to multilateral institutions such as the World Bank. China is the biggest bilateral lender, but its loans are just 20% of the total. Criticism of some loans seems amply justified. In Kenya, local journalists have been probing the terms of the $3.2 billion railway between Nairobi and Mombasa, with worries that Mombasa's port may be pledged as collateral. Ultimately, the debt problem is an African problem, says Anzetse Were, but China is finally getting some pushback, saying that, the West has a long history of supporting its preferred strongmen on the continent, and this is short-sighted. I can't agree more. If African countries need more extra choices over whom they strike deals with, they need the power to choose their politicians too. Bury him, don't elect him. This is Algeria's ailing 82-year-old president who wants a fifth term. This is The Economist. When he faced protests in 2011, Bouteflika bought his way out of trouble with subsidies, pay rises for civil servants and other handouts. This strategy is no longer viable. Kapuscinski, if the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. From his hospital bed in Geneva, Bouteflika said, breaking this peaceful expression by any treacherous internal or foreign group may lead to sedition and chaos and resulting crises and woes. Kapuscinski again, the choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. Africa and the Vision thing was an article I wrote on the 11th of Feb, and to that point, look at this from Ian Bremmer. Africa has the youngest citizens and the oldest leaders, and I was saying, that has got to snap sooner rather than later. But looking at the Vision thing, I think Prime Minister Abiy appears to be sketching out a new African political horizon, and so far is the only person I really can see who's trying to delineate something. 2nd of July, after he'd been in power 90 days, I said these 90 or so days represent the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison, blinking in the sunlight, and constructed his rainbow nation. Allegedly, this is his close protection. At first, I thought it was a James Bond movie, only to be corrected. Ethiopia PM landing in Juba. You probably do need a bit of support in Juba. I've been there a couple of times, they're a bit trigger-happy. El-Bashir mulls the endgame, says Africa Confidential, a state of emergency, appointing military governors, disowning his political allies, has done nothing to halt demands for the president's exit. Announcement of a state of emergency on the 22nd February met with an uptick in protests appears to be a bid to ensure the military's loyalty by appointing senior officers to all 18 provincial states. Khartoum source described the move as a coup against the ruling National Congress Party, which stripped the civilian Islamists of political power. The security chief Salah Mohammed Abdullah Ghosh was reported to have lobbied his counterparts from Egypt, Saudi Arabia and UAE to find ways to back an exit strategy or soft landing for al-Bashir. The central contest remains between the opposition formations and the state security apparatus. What has changed the situation is the determination and resilience of the demonstrators in 15 states in the country, and then the organization by the professional groups of doctors, lawyers, teachers, journalists. In the absence of a widely agreed strategy for a transition, that suggests al-Bashir and the military will ratchet up the repression, hoping to break the will of the growing opposition. Judging by the last 3 months, that will no longer work. 21st of Jan, I said he's a political Harry Houdini, otherwise he would not have lasted more than 3 decades. But it's clear these are the last days or the end times. And I quoted an old Sudanese revolutionary song, "We sing in our prison as you tremble in your castle." 2 main DR Congo parties urged leaders to form a coalition government. Surprise, surprise. The FCC, Kabila's party, has more than 2/3 of the 485 seats, while Tshisekedi has some 50 members. Tshisekedi said he would not accept being a president who reigns but doesn't govern. Seems to have come to some kind of solution. Kabila, of course, when he was being interviewed by all the world's press, quoted Schwarzenegger and said, "I'll be back." And indeed he is. He never went away. Diplomatic progress as Angola hosts Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa is in the Angolan capital of Luanda, where together with his counterpart, João Lourenço, they will continue to restore relations that have previously been strained by anti-corruption issues. During the November trip by Lourenço to Portugal, he compared the fight against corruption in his country to touching a wasp's nest. Have a listen to the interview that I did with Maria João Lopo de Carvalho about Luis de Camões and her book, which followed his journey from Portugal around the Cape of Good Hope, Mozambique, Kenya, Oman, Hormuz, Malacca, Macau. And essentially he was the guy who brought Portugal to Africa and created, the Portuguese Empire. And I've really been enjoying Luis Vaz de Camões' poetry. This is a sonnet. "Leave me all sweet refrains my lip hath made. Leave me all instruments attuned for song. Leave me all fountains pleasant meads among. Leave me all charms of garden and glade. Leave me all melodies the pipe hath played. Leave me all rural feast and sportive throng. Leave me all flocks the reed beguiles along. Leave me all shepherds happy in the shade. Sun, moon and stars for me no longer glow. Night would I have to wail for vanished peace. Let me from pole to pole no pleasure know. Let all that I have loved and cherished cease. But see that thou forsake me not, my woe, who wilt by killing finally release. Zimbabwe's central bank claims it has not fixed the exchange rate at 2.5 RTGS to the dollar, although it has remained stuck at this level since February the 22nd. Burning through those dollars at any rate, and the Old Mutual rate likely to keep rising, running to go backwards at this rate, says Nathan Hayes of the Economic Intelligence Institute. I said on the 25th of February I would definitely be short at 2.5. They can't sustain that. They're only doing that by drip feeding the market. Its real rate is about 6 to 8, as Tendai Biti said. This is a Hail Mary pass. President Lungu's brand new Gulfstream G650 business jet arrived on 28th February and is parked in a purpose-built hangar at Lusaka International Airport, which now boasts a new VIP lounge. This is some footage of the plane from Gregory Chifaya, who said it was $64 million, and Zambia's foreign reserves were $1.5 billion, the lowest in 27 years. Africa Confidential is saying that although the ticket price is $65 million, insiders say the enhancements, which include sophisticated radar systems, bring the total up to $400 million. South African all shares up 5.92% year to date. Dollar versus rand 14.51. Oops. this is now breaking out of the range, actually. Nigerian all shares up 1.97% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 2.37% this year. The Kenyan shilling has jumped to its strongest level against the dollar in more than 3.5 years on Thursday, 99.70. I was talking about this on the 4th of March when I said we're crossing the psychologically important 100 mark. We underestimate the regional safe haven status of the currency. I've noticed that these downside moves in the Tanzanian shilling are being mirrored by the strengthening of the Kenyan shilling. The government of Kenya appears to be inclining towards heavier issuance in the Kenyan shillings with a tax-free infrastructure bond. And then on the charts, it signals a move to 92 and 86. Look at that chart. But that might be too bold. 28th of January, I was warning everybody a move below 100 would catch a lot of people off guard, and I was giving my reasons for that. And I also wrote about it on the 6th of November when the IMF was causing all those problems with their managed currency quote, and I said it isn't, and you've got to compare it with other African currencies. And I was bullish, and everybody else was bearish. Nairobi all shares up 10.92%, and the NSE 20 is up 2.53%. And I'm taking an excursion up north this weekend, and will be back at my desk on Monday, and I thoroughly appreciate you stopping by to listen.